Hey kid, don't ever let them get inside your head. They'll tell you what to do in life instead of everything you know that you could get. Don't let them guide your life towards regret. I'll fight for what I love with every breath. My past is filled with things I won't forget. I use them all to push me to my best. So treat the worst of times just like a test. If only I could go back in time, I'd tell myself that everything will end up alright. Just push yourself, test yourself, figure out what you like, and find your limits, don't be rigid, always work towards a prime. Surround yourself with open minds, people can change your life. A few friends with intent can help you feel alive. Find a passion, take some action, and with a little time, just be patient, make a statement, try to enjoy your life. They'll try to kick you while you're down. They wanna rise up while you drown. They wanna fill your head with doubt. They're silently scared that you'll figure it out.
All right, what is up, Utes fans? Good to be back. This is Joseph with the Utah Utes Football Digest, and we should have Dante Guardi joining us here soon. But it is definitely good to be back. Larry says the Arizona penalty clip was hilarious. That's awesome. I'm glad you enjoyed that, Larry. Yeah, I think a lot of people didn't find the satire in it. I think that's what you're referring to, Larry. Just so you guys know, just the context behind that. So when we beat USC, all USC fans would say is that the reason we won is because of the penalties. And then USC gets one of the worst penalty calls I've ever seen in their favor. And so I made this little clip that's like, USC gets a penalty call. That's why they beat Arizona. That's basically what the caption was. And I just thought it was really funny kind of watching people freak out, because it's like, it's funny that we kept talking about how we didn't beat you guys because of penalties, and they get a huge penalty in their favor. And then they seem to forget how that stuff goes. But anyways, looks like we got Dante Guardi on here with us. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Just enjoying the week. It started snowing, so that's exciting.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just about to say the same thing. It was awesome to see some snow. I mean, depending on how far you're driving, depends on how awesome that is. But good to see snow. It's like clockwork in Utah. November is when it snows. That's kind of just how it goes, man.
It's super wild. It's my first winter fall out here. Actually, I'm from California, so all new to me. And my first time ever driving in snow was earlier today, so it was a weird experience for sure.
Well, be careful, man. It'll get out from under you real quick. Well, we'll enjoy it, man. Stay warm. Greg Hawkins with the super chat. Greg, screw USC, go Utes, baby. I'm with you. And Greg, that's really generous of you, man. Thank you so much for the super chat. Larry says 36-21 over final 44 minutes, and the refs were the reason. Yep. Yeah, okay, and I'm just going to get started. So obviously today we're talking about Utah versus Arizona. Really cool matchup. In Rice Eccles, we should be able to get that home crowd involved and hopefully slow down this high-powered Arizona offense a little bit. Super excited to see him coming in here. Dante, why don't you give us your initial thoughts on Arizona? How do you feel about him? I know for me personally, when I watched them play USC, it changed my opinion of them a little bit. I was a little surprised at just how good that offense was. What are your thoughts on Arizona right now?
Yeah, so they were a team that I was much higher on the consensus heading into the year. I do a thing where I just recap like all the Power 5 teams, and I do I figure out like the team's win totals by Vegas and project like over under. And Arizona was one of the 3 ones that I was leaning very heavy to the over, and it's already kind of hit. It was 3, and they have 3 wins right now. So I was pretty spot on with my analysis of their roster. Their quarterback, Jaden Delora, super explosive player, like one of the most fun players to watch in the nation. Not that he's like crazy good, but the sequence of events when watching him play is super wild. Like in the USC game, he had like a crazy run for like 20 yards, picked up a huge first down. The next play throws an interception. Like you're never going to be bored when watching this kid play football because he's just so electric. I don't really appreciate how he like snapped the U over his leg a few years back. That always kind of made me despise him. But if he didn't do that, he'd definitely be one of my favorite players in the nation because he's super fun to watch. Their wide receivers are all really explosive. Their secondary has a couple of solid pieces, but they don't really look that good on paper because their defensive line can't get any pass rush. But like in reality, they have some formidable players in their secondary, and they're just a really explosive team, really fun to watch. And I'm stoked to be able to watch them play in person and see how the Utes stack up against them.
Yeah, I'm really excited too, man. I think it's a really good test for our defense. And I don't know if you guys knew this, but it started circulating all over Twitter this past week. But Utah has the #1 defense in yards allowed in the Pac-12. I don't know if you saw that this week, Dante, but I was like,
that sounds
damn,
wild.
there must be some bad defenses in the Pac-12.
I would have said like 4 or 5, probably, definitely not #1. But
and to be fair, it does make a little bit of sense, right? They've been really hot, or like they have games where they're allowing less than 10 rushing yards, like Arizona State. But then they also have games like UCLA where they're just, you can get as many yards as you'd like to. So right. It's that's cool to see, though. I do think that gives us a little bit of hope that if our defense comes out to play, especially with a home game, which is promising, we should be able to do a really good job. So key matchups for this game, for me, it's those wide receivers, and I think that's a lot of what makes Jayden de Laura so deadly. Is like you said, he's willing to throw it up, he's willing to take risks. And with this talented receiver group, that is a really deadly recipe. I mean, this receiver group is right up there with any team in the Pac-12. This is a really talented group, right? Dorian Singer, for me, he was the guy that really stood out to me when I was watching the USC game.
Yeah.
Damn, dude. He was catching one-hand jump balls with a guy draped down his back.
And then he had one that was damn close to another like SportsCenter top 10 grab, and he dropped it. But I mean, it was a wild throw, and the fact that he was even able to put himself in a position to possibly catch that ball was just ridiculous. He is one hell of a player, that's for sure.
No, yeah, he is. For my money, I mean, I was, it's just the eye test, and PFF has Jacob Cowing graded a little higher than him. So Jacob Cowing's #2, Dorian Singer's #5 when you guys are watching the Arizona-Utah game, just so you know who to look for. But, that's 2 really good receivers. And then the third guy, McMillan, is pretty damn good too. He'd be right up there with some of the better receivers on our team if he was on Utah's squad. So this is a really good group. CKS says, I'm most interested in seeing if, in fact, the Ute D is, in fact, on the rise and rolling. I think it's kind of like I said, man, it depends how they come out. I'm a little worried about RJ Hubert not being in for that first half. It could hurt us.
I didn't even take that into account. I kind of forgot about that.
Dude, I made my video on Monday, and I totally forgot about it, and someone commented it on the video, and I was like, oh, yeah, we don't have RJ Hubert for the first half. You think Sione Vaki gets that shot, or you think he stays nickel and they put Isbell back there?
Honestly, with either one, you don't really know what you're going to get. Vaki looked really good in terms of like his closing speed and limiting yards after the catch, but he was never really tried deep. Whereas this week, he will most definitely be tried deep because that's what Arizona does. I mean, their quarterback's averaging over 10 air yards per attempt, and they got a bunch of guys averaging more than like 15 yards per catch. So they're obviously going to try you deep, and it's going to be very interesting to see how whoever is back there at safety for Utah plays, because Washington State isn't really going to stretch you vertically like Arizona will. So I'm leaning more towards Isbell. Honestly, I think his range and his overall just length is very good. And I think that he'd be able to bat down some of those 50-50 balls that Sione Vaki probably couldn't. And Vaki is also a freshman. Isbell was an FCS All-American, I believe. So he has that experience playing against higher competition, whereas Vaki's still kind of getting into the just learning the system kind of. So I would rather see Isbell. But either way, I'm going to be honest, I don't really see either one of them having like a crazy day for that first half. I think Arizona will probably be able to get a couple of chunk plays on either one.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised either. Rowan says Vaki looked really good against Wazoo at Nickelback last week. Changed the defense a lot. I trust Isbell, though, to fill in. Yeah, I thought Vaki was awesome last week. Dude, I was like, you're watching it, you're like, why is this the first time this kid's seeing the field? Right. I mean, he looked fantastic. I felt like he reminded me a lot of Karine Reed, just how he played. Like a guy that can stop the run well and be a decent coverage guy too. So I liked him a lot there. My only thing with Isbell, trust me, I am a big Isbell fan. I think he's going to be a great player. He is definitely more of a run support guy. I did a lot of like breaking down his tape and looking into him before he came over to Utah. And he's a really good run support guy. I just worry about such a talented receiver group. I'm not saying he couldn't do it. I just wonder if he might have some struggles there. But either way, I wouldn't mind seeing him, hit the field. And on that point, let's talk about key matchups to this game. And before we move into the key matchups, guys, please do make sure you guys like the video. It'll help get it out to more Utes fans. Also, comment in the chat, guys. I really like this show to be about our little, Utah Utes Football Digest community. Any questions you guys have, seriously, I really enjoy going over them and spending time on them. More than happy to talk about them, guys. So feel free to drop any questions you have in the chat. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. I think Capisi is actually the one that commented on the video on Monday and told me that Huber was out. He reminded me about it. Second concern is weather playing a factor. Little gun shy last time Utah played Zona with weather. Yeah. I'd say that would benefit us, though. Yeah. I mean, I would imagine we're a little more used to the snow than Arizona would be. So,
yeah, I think that definitely advantages us because it's also very tough to throw football in the snow. And Utah runs the ball a lot more than Arizona does. Even though Utah hasn't been running the ball like crazy this year, they still run the ball a lot more than Arizona does because those boys would much rather throw than do anything else.
Yeah. All right. And now talking about key matchups. So, and if you have another group that you think is the key matchup, I'd love to hear it. But I'm guessing we both feel like the key matchup is going to be our wide receivers or their wide receivers against our DBs. I mean, do you think that's fair, or do you have another group you wanted to touch on?
Kind of. I think that Utah's defensive line is going to need to be able to wrap up in the backfield because when you watch Jaden Delores' film, he is awesome at evading pressure and evading guys in the backfield, but he's also very hesitant to run. A lot of the times he'll evade somebody and have about 10, 15 yards of green in front of him to run, and he'll just stand at the line of scrimmage waiting for a guy to get open. So I think Utah will have to limit kind of that whole thing and not be able to give Arizona's receivers 6-7 seconds of separation or 6-7 seconds to get separation. So I think Van Fillinger, Jonah Ellis, Gabe Reed are all going to have to play a big factor and be sound wrapping up Jaden Delore in the backfield and not let him get those extra 3 and 4 seconds because that's where he really thrives.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if you remember last week. Do you remember who I told you the impact player was going to be?
Yeah, and he did. He did.
It was kind of a long shot, but I was happy. And then you said Zemiah Vaughn. I think he had a pretty good game too. Yeah.
I mean, if you're a cornerback and I don't remember any of your plays, you did fantastic. So.
That's the number one key to being a good corner. So I feel like just so you know, the reason I brought that up was this offensive line is really similar to that Washington State offensive line. Not quite as bad, but their right tackle, PFF grade is a big liability. So Gabe Reed and Van Fillinger are the guys that line up on that left side. So, and who knows who else will be there, but those are the main two. And if they get opportunities, man, I could see them really causing a field day back there. But I'm with you. The number one thing is it's two things really. One, once you get back there, wrap up, and then two, contain. That's one thing we've really struggled with all year. We get excited because we get the release off the tackle, and then we over pursue, and the quarterback just gets this huge lane to just go do whatever he wants. Even if he doesn't run, it's still like, well, he can just hang out over there for a while and wait for someone to get open. So, but either way, for me, the big matchup is going to be Utah's corners against Arizona's wide receivers. Honestly, I would love if it's a heavy snow game. I actually think that would benefit us a lot. This is a high flying. And I think a lot of people, I don't know if everyone watched the breakdown I did earlier this week, but I knew it after watching the USC game that this was a really good team. And I think a lot of people might be thinking that this is the same Arizona team from last year, right? They're like, oh, they weren't very good last year. They're a little better, but they're probably just pretty overrated. I'm telling you guys, that's not the team we're going against. I'd say if anything, their record doesn't represent what their offense can do. Their defense is a straight up nightmare. I honestly believe whether Cam's in or if Bryson Barnes is in, we're going to score pretty damn consistently. But I do think that this offense is going to give us some struggles. So I just put their team up on the screen, ESPN. I just wanted to show everybody this. So take a look here, guys. They have a receiver with 800 yards, a receiver with 700 yards, and a receiver with 530 yards. Between those three receivers, they have 6, 5, and 7 touchdowns. So between the three, we're looking at 18 touchdowns. And just to give you guys an idea, that means they're going to throw the ball a lot. I mean, I know we touched on this receiving group a lot. And are you with me that Singer's the number one, or who else do you think we got to keep an eye on?
Cowling for sure. That dude can flat out ball. He had over 1,400 yards, I believe, last year at UTEP. He actually averaged, I think, the second most yards per out run in the nation last year. He was ahead of like Jackson Smith and Jigba, some really good players. He's great after the catch, elite separator, kind of just has everything in his arsenal, just a flat out stud. So I think he's the one to watch. But I mean, the other two guys are obviously very good as well. And McMillan's a true freshman. Keep that in mind. This kid's going to be on Arizona for a long time. It needs to be a nightmare for a plethora of years to come. He's from Southern California, right around my neighborhood. I've been hearing this kid's name since he was a freshman in high school. He was an Oregon commit. He's Arizona's highest rated recruit of all time. Big catch radius, solid speed, can go up and grab one, just an all-around stud. And then obviously you saw what Dorian Singer did last week to USC. I mean, he was all over the place making spectacular catch after spectacular catch.
Yeah, and you said McMillan was the super high-rated recruit they got, right?
Yeah, he's their highest-rated recruit of all time.
Greg says, I honestly think Arizona is better than their record. I'm with you, Greg. And
they played a pretty tough non-conference. Sorry to interrupt you, but they played Mississippi State. I mean, North Dakota State, sure, it's an FCS school, but I mean,
they're the best FCS.
They're the best FCS school. And then San Diego State, they came into that game opening the year as a touchdown underdog, won by like 28 points. So, I mean, they've scored some points on some teams that they weren't supposed to score points on, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, for real. I say at this point, their offense is legit. I mean, if you guys have seen the stats and the breakdown I did on Monday about their defense, it is bad. Like, they have a very bad defense. It is like one of the worst in the country. But that brings me to talking a little bit about injuries. And do you have any insight, Dante, on any of the injuries or who might or might not be playing this week?
They love covering this stuff up, man. They really love just not announcing anything. My guess would be that Cameron Rising does play. Tavion probably out. Dalton's been the one that I was very curious why there hasn't been much news about his status, because personally, when I saw him go down, I said to myself, he's done for the year and we're going to have to really figure it out. And some receivers are really going to have to step up. Obviously, if it was a season-ending injury, Witt would have announced it. He didn't announce it. So I'm kind of going by ear and just kind of expecting him to not play this week and then maybe down the road in the Oregon game or something like that, because we know it's not season ending, but he did look like he was in a good amount of pain, and I would not expect to see him suit up this week, unfortunately.
Yeah, I feel almost exactly the same, man. I feel like with Cam Rising, I feel like I'd be more surprised if he didn't play than if he did. I don't have a ton of sources, but the sources I do have seem to hint at the fact that Cam Rising's going to play.
Yeah, I'm on board with that.
Yeah. It's like they didn't tell me a yes, but it felt like he was going to play.
Yeah, and then it's been what, 3 weeks since the USC game now? He's got plenty of time. Nothing like the injury isn't too crazy, obviously. I mean, he warmed up and stuff like that. Another week of rest. I feel like he's got to go here.
Well, and that's the other point, right? It's like he was a game time decision personally of whether he went or not against Washington State. Plus, it's been 10 days when we hit Saturday since Washington State. I got to imagine that he's feeling a little better, right? Has Witt done any open tryouts for kickers? Is Zona's special teams any good? I really don't have any info on their special teams, but I'm sure if a kicker wants to try out, he is entertaining it.
Yeah, definitely.
And then, I agree. Dalton Kincaid, it feels like he's out. I would also say, even if Cam, and personally, I think we're at a point with Tavion where you got to ask yourself, he is a monster when his head's on straight, but I'm not sure what's going on there. And I think if it's not the right call to get him in, you don't even know if you'd want him in, right? You kind of like, if there is a behind the scenes issue we're not aware of, maybe it's the best call to just let that develop. I do know I've noticed on Twitter, Tavion seemingly actively trying to make it clear that he wants to be a team player, just like he's sharing posts and saying like captions like, oh, go Utes, like I'm supporting you guys from home, that sort of thing. You guys could check out his Twitter if you want to see all that. But it does seem like he's trying, but we don't know the whole story. I'm not going to weigh too much on that. I do think, though, Jalen Glover brings a lot. Like, I think he looked great, dude. Until we were in garbage time chewing the clock, he was at 15 carries for 72 yards. That's almost 5 yards a carry. He started getting stopped at the line when we were chewing the clock, but that was the point. Like, it's like if you get something, you get some, but we're just trying to run that clock down. And so I feel really good about Jalen Glover. How do you feel about the running back situation there, Dante?
Honestly, for me with this game, it's not so much about the running backs. I think you could stick anyone back there and they'd be able to have a fine game against this Arizona front seven. Like, they are very atrocious. Not a single
Have
one
you
of their
seen the linebackers?
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. I mean, not even the linebackers, man. The entire front seven outside of Kion Bars, who was an All Pac-12 second team selection last year, but even him, his stats are pretty below average as well. But the linebackers are both terrible. They don't have a single starter on their front seven that has an above average depth per tackle or above average stop rate. They are atrocious across the board. I think Utah's offensive line is simply going to manhandle them. I mean, you could put me back there and I'll average 4.5 yards per carry. That's how strongly I feel about Utah's offensive line getting
average 4.5
yards. Mike Mekhi Bernard, Quentin Jackson, Jalen Glover, whoever it is, I think combined they're going to have one of their best rushing performances of the year, if not the best.
Yeah. Oh, and CKS brings up a good point. I think you touched on it too, right? Oregon's just a couple weeks away. If anyone is a risk at injury, I think like you said, this offense is going to do a good job no matter who we have in there with our depth. And so it's like if anyone's questionable, Oregon's really soon, guys. If you want to put in a questionable guy, you put him in against Oregon. You don't put him in now. Like let's at least get there because that's the game that'll kind of define the season as long as we can keep winning. I do want to show – what were you going to say?
Yeah, so kind of circling back to Tavion, I think if he's going to come back to the team this season and is going to make an impact, I think he's got to play next week against Stanford. I think sit him out for this week, let him recuperate a little bit, and then bring him back against Stanford. If he does super well against Stanford, which he did last year, he had 4 first-half touchdowns against them and had –
oh, what a game, dude. That's
that
a flashback.
Fantastic. So if he does well against Stanford like he did last year, I think that's a great opponent to get him back, get his head back on straight, kind of rejuvenize what happened last year against Stanford. That was his big breakout game, and then get him hot right before Oregon. Whereas I wouldn't like to see Oregon being his first game back, high leverage situation, first game back, just a lot of question marks there. Whereas I'd like to see him against Stanford to see how he does there, and then hopefully that translates against the Ducks in the week after.
Yeah, that's a great idea. That makes a lot of sense, dude. A lot of sense. All right. I just wanted to show you this. I just put it up on the screen. This is the linebacker core for Arizona. You know, and I'm not trying to make any of these kids feel bad, right? They're young guys. They're doing their best. But I talked about it in the breakdown. This is, as far as I can remember, I do the PFF grade breakdown every week for every team we play. This is the worst position group I've ever seen. Like, I've never seen it where every single guy is a 44 or lower, and one of them's a 33, right? I'm not trying to embarrass anybody. I'm just saying, like, if anyone didn't watch the breakdown, just understand this linebacker group, we should be eating a lot, right? I think if we can get second level consistently, we're going to have a really fun time. If Dalton Kincaid's in there, we're going to have a great time, dude. And on that note, that's kind of talking about the injuries. Anything else that you want to touch on for Arizona, Utah?
I mean, I think we kind of covered the big thing, which is just their pass catchers versus ours. But I do want to dive into their secondary a little bit. They're not as bad as what people make them out to be. Like I said, their defensive line is terrible at getting pressure, which kind of brings some lapses in their secondary because they just can't cover guys for 6-7 seconds, which is not what a corner is supposed to do traditionally. But they do have a couple of solid-ish corners. Christian Roland Wallace is their main guy. He's allowing an 89.9 passer rating, has 4 pass breakups on the year, and he's got a pretty big frame, not afraid to get physical out there. And then Tradan Stukes is the other one. He's their cornerback too. Was injured a little bit to start the year, kind of still getting back on track. But last year, I mean, the numbers this year are very bad. Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat that, but last year he was a lockdown corner on an Arizona defense that was far worse than they were this year. Sure, they're still not very good this year, but last year was a completely different story. They were abysmal on all fronts, except for Tradan Stukes, their corner, who allowed a 64.4 passer rating when targeted. He gave up 0 touchdowns, playing for the worst defense in arguably Power 5. He had six pass breakups and only allowed a 46% completion percentage when targeted. So they do have some very solid corners. And if Dalton Kincaid's not going to play, I think these Utah receivers are going to kind of have their hands full more than people are making it out to be, and they're going to have to really play a great game.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. I wouldn't say their DBs are bad. So what I noticed when I was doing the breakdown here, you got the really good player in Christian Roland Wallace, and then you got a slightly below average corner. I know I didn't do too much diving in on Trading Stooks, however you say it. But it seems like he's having a rough time coming off that injury. So you got the one very good corner, and then the rest of them seem a little suspect. And then you got the exact same thing at safety, right? You have the one really good safety in Turner, and then you got the not so good safety in Christian Young. So I kind of
even with their safeties though, I think their corners are exponentially better than their safeties are just on eye test film. Wise, I think their corners are actually pretty dang good compared to the safeties. I think if Utah's able to hit some deep shots, it's not going to be pretty Saturday for Arizona, and they're going to really struggle because if Utah's got the deep ball rolling and able to get Money Parks, Jalen Dixon, guys like that involved, I think they're going to have an absolute field day on offense.
Yeah, no, and it's I'm just so you know, I'm agreeing with you about the DBs. It is a decent group. What it is though, you look at both the corner and safeties. There's one very good one, and then there's another two that aren't very good. Definitely. They're below average, and so I think it's going to be a little bit of find the matchups, right? Find who the good corner and who the good safety are on, and kind of try to avoid them. So that's my thought on that. But you're right there. This isn't going to be if we try to target the wrong DBs and we try to just throw it up for grabs against their better corners, then we might have some problems. But I'm sure you might feel similarly. I think we're going to run the ball a lot. I think we're going to go out there, we're going to run the ball down their throat, and this could be the first game. This feels to me like it could be Stanford from last year. Like this is the game where it's like we could run for 200 250 plus yards. For sure, you don't predict that, but if there was a game where it's going to happen, this would be it. Anything else you want to cover about this game, Dante, or you want to move to the Pac-12?
Just bouncing off what you just said, I could definitely see that being the case. I do believe Arizona is substantially better than Stanford. I don't think Stanford's a good football team at all. I think they're extremely bad, personally. But I think these next 2 weeks are going to be really big for Utah's rushing attack, especially before that Oregon game, who has a much better front seven than either of these teams, as poor as they are. Oregon is very good on their front seven, very good at stopping the run. So if Utah's going to get something cooking with their rushing attack, these are the 2 weeks to do it. Running back by committee, you find your RB1, whatever it might be, just get the offensive line confident because they really haven't been getting all that much push this season. And against Oregon, they're really going to have to step it up because they got some physical dudes on their front seven.
Yeah, I think these next 2 weeks are going to be important to kind of set us up for Oregon, work out a lot of the kinks we have because
definitely.
Yeah, they're a good team, man. CKS brings up, before we move into the Pac-12 schedule and talking about those games, CKS brings up, how is this season going to affect Tavion's draft prospects? So the season's not over, right? There's still a good chunk of games left, but I felt like Tavion was going to declare last year. Personally, it was such a big year for him, that especially when TJ Pleasure declared, I was surprised it was him instead of Tavion. If he doesn't figure it out, I'm sure it's greatly going to hurt his draft stock. I mean, we don't have to spend too much time on that, and I hope he figures it out. But if he doesn't, it's going to be a bad thing for his draft stock. Greg says he's bulking up, and Witt's playing 4D chess, just saving him for the tough games. Hey, I hope you're right, Greg. I hope you're right, man. Capizzi says, if Tavion needs a confidence boost to restart his season, this game is the one to do it. Yeah, I mean, how fun would that be? We have all these questions about Tavion. We're all concerned about what's going to happen from here on. If he were to just come out and just start 7 to 8 yards a carry, 4 touchdowns, that would be pretty damn cool, dude. All right, but anyways, let's move into the Pac-12. And any questions, guys, drop in the chat. Make sure you guys like the video. It helps get it out to more fans. And if you guys are a big Utah football fan, make sure you guys subscribe. And make sure you guys follow Dante. Let me put your name up here, man. Give me 1 second. Boom.
Appreciate that.
Dante, it's awesome of you to come on here every week, man. It gives me someone to bounce stuff off and some extra insight. I appreciate it a lot. So let's move into the Pac-12, guys. So first game let's talk about is the Friday night game. That should be a really fun one, dude. That's a good Friday night game. The last Friday night game, some random team got smashed on by East Carolina, I think it was.
Wonder who that was.
Yeah, it was strange because he was a monster in the UCLA game. All right, and then so let's talk about this Friday night game. Oregon State headed into Washington to take on the Huskies. Home game for Washington. Dante, let's get your thoughts, man. How are you feeling?
Yeah, so Oregon State traditionally is really bad on the road. I think last year they were 5-1 at home, 1-5 on the road, something like that. And it's been pretty similar this year. They picked up a nice win against a healthy Fresno State team who is actually pretty solid when they're healthy. They lost a couple of games because their quarterback got hurt, but Oregon State beat a very good Mountain West team on the road earlier in the year, which is nice. They also smoked Boise State, who now is looking like the favorite in the Mountain West too. So they have a couple nice wins on their resume. But early in the year, I was really high on their offensive line. I thought they had the second best offensive line in the conference heading in behind their in-state rivals. But I also said if they can find a running back one, this is going to be a really scary team to face. And they have done that. And it's true freshman Damian Martinez. He's averaging over 6 yards per carry, over 3.5 yards after contact per carry. He's just been extremely good, and the offensive line is going to do their thing as well. This game has some weird weather conditions. I'm talking 40-plus mile-per-hour winds, rain, and that does not play good towards the Huskies because they love to throw the football. Michael Penix Jr. is leading the nation in passing yards. They got some really explosive wide receivers. But in that sort of weather, I don't like the matchup for Washington. I think Oregon State is going to be very good running the football here. I think Damian Martinez picks up where he left off last week. Past few games, he's gotten over 100 yards the last two games. I think he does that again here. I think Oregon State runs the ball really well, and they have a really good secondary too, which matches up well in these conditions against an explosive Washington passing attack. So this Oregon State team is much better defensively than anyone Washington's played all year, and the weather conditions also don't favor the Huskies whatsoever. I think Oregon State wins this game. I'll say 28-24, something like that.
I feel that. I feel really similar to you about Oregon State winning this game. I think they will win it. I wasn't even aware of the weather conditions, so that makes it even more in their favor. Like, they're just kind of a smash mouth, nasty team that wants to run the ball on people. So you look at Oregon State's schedule, not exactly a gauntlet, but they've kept it, like, honestly, outside of our game, they basically, I think they're undefeated except for the USC game, which was just a 3-point loss, right? So this is not just some random team. We all know from last year, Oregon State's pretty damn good. They can beat anyone on any day. They run the ball really well. If they can start to get ahead of you and start to just control the clock and slowly pound it out, that's what's going to happen. I think for me, I was hyped on Washington as they started to get the momentum, but I didn't jump on the train. I wasn't like they're going to. I remember. Do you remember in the what was it, Washington? It was when they got like exposed. It was Washington UCLA.
Yeah, that was the game they lost. Yeah.
And the guy in the broadcast says, for me, Michael Penix is my number one candidate for Heisman right now. And literally after that,
at the time, that was fair.
It went downhill, dude. It was just big.
Yeah. I've always liked Michael Penix. He, I was very high on Indiana during the COVID year, and he made me look very smart because they kept on winning and I kept on saying they would win. So he always has a special place in my heart, and he's an extremely talented football player, can throw all over the field. But like I said, 40-mile-per-hour wins for an air raid offense is just a recipe for disaster, and especially when you're going up against, in my opinion, the best secondary in the conference.
Yeah. No, for sure. Yeah, it's a really good secondary for Oregon State as well. Yeah, it's kind of like I don't think Washington's particularly good at stopping the run, and I think Oregon State is very good at stopping the pass. So it's a bad matchup for Washington. I see Oregon State coming out of this one 7-2. I'd probably say pretty similar to you, maybe a little more significant of a win, like a 28-21 sort of thing. But either way, somewhat close game, and they come out with the win. Yeah. All right, now let's move to the next game. I'll touch on this one first. So this is Oregon going into Colorado to take on the Buffs. Now, this is my sleeper upset pick of the week. I got Colorado. I'm just kidding.
I was like, whoa.
I got Colorado winning 48-10. No, I'm just kidding. But I got Oregon winning big in this one. Colorado's not a very good team. They obviously have not figured out what they're doing at quarterback. It doesn't seem to be clicking. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this one. Oregon's a very good team. There was a time last week at the beginning of the game where Cal felt in the game, but that happens all the time in college football, where the first quarter is a little weird and then the other team figures out what you're doing. So still feel like Oregon's going to go in there with the chainsaw and just cut them to pieces. So that's where I'm at. Not too much analytical data on that. I just feel like Colorado's going to get beat pretty bad.
Yeah, for me, personally, I want Colorado to lose out because up to this point, I've predicted their schedule perfectly. I had them beating preseason. I had them going 1-11 with a win against Cal. So I need them to keep on losing to make me look good. But this game just has all like the recipe for disaster for the Buffs. Last week, I thought was really impressive by Oregon because coming off that big win, away game, a little bit of a hangover spot, and Cal's always pretty sound defensively. So a little bit of a sneaky trap for Oregon last week. They got out of it very well alive. I mean, they won by 18 points. Bo Nix threw for over 400 yards. And I mean, this is just a Colorado team that doesn't have anything going right for them. Their quarterback leads the Pac-12 in turnover-worthy pass rate. He's also last in the conference in yards per attempt and pretty much every major stat. So a really bad matchup for the Buffs here. I think Oregon wins this game, pretty handedly. I'm not going to give out a score prediction because I personally wasn't really looking too heavily in this game, but I do think Oregon wins by a substantial amount for sure.
Yeah, I think Oregon will score as much as they'd like to score. It depends on how early they get up, how much they run the clock. And they might put in backups. So
exactly. They tend to do that too in the fourth quarter. I mean, they got a 31. They're favored by 31 points. I don't think I've ever seen that in a Pac-12 game before. It's absolutely wild.
I mean, Colorado's got to be up there as one of the worst teams in the FBS right now. I mean, I'm not sure.
They're probably the worst in Power 5. I think that's a fair statement to make. And I mean, just nothing going right for them.
All right. In the next matchup, we got Washington State at Stanford. Why don't you give us your thoughts, Dante? You don't like Stanford, I know that.
Yeah, no, I really don't like Stanford. I think Tanner McKee is probably the most overrated quarterback prospect I've ever seen. I hate to bag on the kid. He has a really awesome story, and I really hope he ends up doing well. I mean, he overcame cancer from a young age, like just a super awesome dude, and a pretty solid football player. But I do think a little bit of the hype is being overblown as in terms of his NFL ability. But Stanford, they do have some solid receivers. John Humphreys is pretty good. Benjamin Urosek is also a fantastic tight end. So they got some talented players on their offense. But Washington State, we saw them last week. Their defense is pretty sound. I don't think they're bad at all. Stanford's offensive line is atrocious. We saw those Washington State defensive ends last week. Sure, they didn't do crazy good, but they are very solid players. Brennan Jackson and Ron Stone. I think they get some pressure on Tanner McKee, and he's also not the fastest quarterback. He's not very good at evading pressure. So I see a lot of sacks for the Cougs. And then for offense, Stanford doesn't really have any outstanding strengths on offense. And we know how bad Washington State's offensive line is. Stanford's pass rush is arguably just as bad. So the one spot where Washington State traditionally struggles, I don't think they're going to struggle there. Give me the Cougars here by like 7 to 10 points.
Awesome. This is actually a fun matchup because it's the team we just played and then the team we're about to play in a week. Right. So Washington State, they do a very good job rushing the passer. I think they'll get back there. They'll give Tanner McKee problems. I haven't spent a ton of time, I'm just going to be honest, looking at Stanford. But in the times where I watch their offense, it feels like they're trying to run this quick passing, short passing, air raid-esque offense. And this is what I see. And it's not working. I don't know what it is. And like you said, Tanner McKee, it's been probably 2 years now. Like I remember all last season as well, people were talking about Tanner McKee as a guy to watch going into the draft. And I kept thinking, I just don't see it. That's just kind of how I felt with Tanner McKee. I do a lot of draft stuff too. I'm a big Jets fan, so I on the drafts. But anyways, I just never saw it. I don't have a ton of faith in Stanford. If they did win, I wouldn't be shocked. But Washington State has a really good group of wide receivers. If Cam Ward can get the ball in their hands and let them make plays, like we said, right, a couple of weeks ago, they were averaging 7.5, 8 yards, like you said, a catch after the catch. So I think they're a very good team, but we were just better on the night. And most of their Pac-12 losses are against very good Pac-12 teams. And they really almost beat Oregon, dude. Don't forget about that.
Yeah, I mean, they had a 12-point lead on them with like 6 minutes left.
They were
right there.
They had the game. They just gave it away. Definitely. All right, now let's move into this final game here. So Cal versus USC, the late night game. Damn, that's a late game. Imagine if you're on the East Coast. Game starts at 10:30. That's
The UCLA game or the USC game?
Cal and USC, yeah,
Right.
8:30 Mountain Time, so 10:30 Eastern. That's crazy.
I think the UCLA game's on at the same time too.
The UCLA game? Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot about the UCLA game.
I was confused. I was like, where is it? Okay.
We'll touch on that next. So Cal versus USC. So why don't you go first with this one? Cal versus USC.
Yeah, Cal, they got a couple of good players. Daniel Scott, one of their safeties. I've been very vocal about him. I think he's an awesome player. He's going to be an NFL guy where everyone looks back and goes, how did I not know about this kid in college? Because he's a stud. Very sound all around. He's a guy that quarterbacks always have to know where he is because he's so versatile, such a great safety, and honestly, one of the most underrated players in college football. And then Jackson Sirmon, the defensive coordinator's son, Washington transfer. He had like 90-plus tackles last year, having another solid season this year. But Cal isn't very strong up front. Their pass rush isn't that great. And I think with that being said, USC's talent is just going to take over from that point. I think Cal can hang for a little bit, but as the game goes on, I think Cal's just going to get gassed. It's a home game for USC. Sure, they don't have too many fans show up, but it's still a home game. You still have that extra support there for you. I think USC wins this game by around 20 points. I'll say 42-20.
Yeah, I feel really similarly. It's kind of like even if Cal does find a way to keep it tight for a while, once it comes time to say, okay, Caleb Williams, put the game on your back and go make some plays, he's going to get it done. I see him winning by 10 to 14 points.
Yeah, I kind of see this one being similar to the Cal game last week where they look all right, they come up with a solid game plan, but then eventually talent just takes over and they get ran out of the stadium.
Yep, I'm with you. All right, now UCLA, ASU, let's hear it.
I'm going to go bold here. I think the Sun Devils steal one from the Bruins here. I really do. They got some solid players.
Really?
They really have some solid players.
Imagine how good that win looks. If they were to beat UCLA, how good our win over ASU must look.
I think there's a very good chance, honestly. So yeah. Arizona State, they got some talented players on offense. Elijah Badger put on an absolute clinic last week. He's great in the open space, can play all over the field, wins at all three levels, is a true do-it-all receiver, and would be much more known if he was on a solid team. Tavion Thomas leads FBS in rushing yards all time, not this season. I'm talking like he's been playing for like 5 years, and he's had like over 1,000 yards in every season, I believe. So he's a very serviceable running back. And then their quarterback, Emory Jones, is no longer Arizona State's quarterback. They made a change. Tanner Bourguet has came in and really he's been lighting it up, man. They brought him in relief of Jones against Washington, the game they ended up winning at home. They put up 45 points in that one. Bourguet completed a first down on like half of his dropback, so super efficient passer, very accurate too. He's played in 2 games this year. Both of those games, he's had an adjusted completion percentage better than 80%. Last week, lit it up against Colorado. Arizona State put up 40 points in that game. The only 2 games that they've scored 40 or more points in, Tanner Bourguet has been their quarterback. He's been very efficient. They have some playmakers on offense. I think they're going to be able to put up a ton of points here. I'm going to say Arizona State wins this game 41-38. It's going to be very close.
Damn, 90.3 QBR.
I'm going to ride the hot hand. Tanner Bourguet, he is playing at a very high level, and he's a name to keep your eye on for next year because he's shown a lot of great flashes so far.
Yeah, and it's what would you say? Is it good for us or bad for us if UCLA loses? I mean, they did beat us, but
for us, honestly, I really do. I know there's some talk about Utah getting into the playoff as a 2-loss team. I'm kind of like throwing that out of the picture. So much stuff would have to happen for that to be the case. I just don't want to really think about that. I got my eyes set on the Pac-12 championship, and any loss from one of the big schools, so USC, UCLA, Oregon, is a win for Utah in my book. So I'm really hoping that one of those teams can lose a game. And honestly, looking at their schedules, I think this is the most fitting. Actually, you know what? Scratch that. Oregon State, I think, will beat Oregon, but for like these like smaller schools where everyone's kind of a wild card, I think Arizona State definitely has the best chance to upset somebody.
Yeah, and I would say I agree. That's how I feel too. If UCLA, I mean, a 10-2 Pac-12 team getting into the playoff, I mean, that's a little wild.
So much would have to happen. So much, and it's
I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's like a 98% chance it doesn't happen.
You saw the same thing that I did then too, huh?
Oh no, I just threw that out.
Really? Okay, because ESPN threw out a graphic, and it was like Utah had the 10th best chances to make the playoff, and it was literally 2%. That's too funny.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yep, that's just I've got that ESPN mind. Dude. But I don't feel like UCLA is going to lose. If they did lose, I feel really good about that because I think USC doesn't feel as good as I think we did something to them. I think we shook them up a little bit. I wouldn't be shocked to see them drop a game before it's all said and done, which would mean it's us and Oregon in the Pac-12 championship as long as we beat Oregon, right? And I would really feel like we control our own. And you correct me if I'm wrong here, Dante, but if we have the tiebreaker over Oregon or over USC, if we beat Oregon, we get in, right? Or even if we if it comes down to us and USC because we have the win over USC, we get in, right?
Yeah, if Utah wins out, I mean, they're in. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. If Utah wins out, they're in. If we lose a game, other stuff will have to happen, and it's Pac-12, so you can never underestimate the chaos that comes with being in this conference. But if Utah wins out, they will for sure be in the Pac-12 championship game.
Nice. All right, yeah. So we got Trenton Bourguet here. I haven't been following ASU too much since we beat them, and I wasn't aware of the QB change. But I do think I would still say UCLA is going to win. I can't imagine ASU stopping them too much. We have the number 1 defense in the Pac-12, dude. Don't forget about that. And I would just say, it felt when I was watching our game against UCLA, I got to a point mentally where I was like, honestly, why don't we just onside kick it? Like it really got to that. In my head, I was like, we are not even getting close to stopping them.
Yeah.
And
when it comes to doing
my
getting
whole
what
thing
you
is
need
just
starts with
I
our
feel
own.
like that
Need
is
it
a
today,
very,
pick it
very
up
good
curbside.
offense.
Need it to you, we deliver.
I don't think
Your
ASU
trunk,
will be able to keep
our
up.
trucks.
So that's just kind of
However
how I
you
feel
get it.
about it. So.
You got the okay, never mind. You got it out. The ESPN was playing in the background of you talking.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
all right,
sorry.
but anyways, and then finally, let's hear the predictions for the Arizona-Utah game. If you have yours ready, I think what would be a fun exercise, Dante, is I feel pretty confident that Kincaid is not in. That's kind of how I feel, but I think it's worth saying, okay, let's give our predictions with Rising in and without Rising. What do we think? You go first, Dante.
Without Cameron Rising, I'll say Utah wins this game 38-24. With Cameron Rising, 49-24.
Whew. I feel. Do you want to give any detail on it? How you think it goes, or anything like that?
I mean, I think Utah really establishes the run here. I mean, the weather is going to play a factor, I think, in terms of Arizona's passing attack. They don't like to run the ball. They don't run the ball very well. Whereas Utah, the offensive line matches up very well against this Arizona defensive line. I think they're starting to get their swagger, getting their confidence back. Satara Lomea had a fantastic game last week, and he's really the only wild card week in and week out. And if he plays like that again, this Utah offensive line is a very good unit, and I think they'll be able to establish the run extremely well, open up the passing attack, hit some deep shots. That's the difference between Rising and Barnes. I think Rising will be able to hit a couple more deep shots than Barnes will, but either way, I don't see Utah having too much trouble moving the ball. And for Arizona, I think they'll get a couple of chunk plays here and there, but I don't see them being able to move the ball like extremely well, like over and over and over again. I think they're gonna be a little bit sporadic, probably a couple turnovers. Utah capitalizes, things like that to end up separating the two teams. But like I said, regardless, I think Utah wins this game by double digits, no matter who's playing quarterback.
Yep. I wouldn't say quite that, but I agree. No matter who's playing quarterback, I feel very good about the win. I think our defense is going to struggle at times against this Arizona team. How I look at it, it's funny. With Cam, I have almost the exact same score for us as you do. I'm saying 48-34. I think they are going to put up points, but I think no matter who's in at quarterback, I will be very surprised, if we don't just score at will. I can't imagine this being a game where it's like a defensive battle. I think we're going to, at least 75% of the drives we're getting a touchdown or a field goal. And then with Bryson Barnes, I'm going 38-31, more of a clock control game, keep it tight. I do see this offense moving the ball a lot. I would love if we held them to 24. I don't trust this defense quite that much, man. They concern me a little bit.
That's fair. I think also for an air raid team, if you're playing a team that likes to control the clock like Utah will in this game, in my opinion, because Arizona's front seven is just simply atrocious. There's no other way to put it. I think that puts them in a really bad spot. It puts a lot of pressure on them to score on every single drive, and I just don't think that is going to happen with a quarterback that turns the ball over almost more than everyone in the country. Honestly, I think he's top 5 in turnover-worthy pass percentage, but he's also like top 5 in big time throw percentage. So you got to kind of sort that out. I think they'll be able to get a couple of chunk plays, like I said, but every single drive in and drive out, I think the weather's going to play a factor. I think he's going to commit a couple of turnovers, and it's just going to be a really inconsistent day, but the highlights will be there for them.
Yeah, no, they're going to get a lot of plays, and you know, when I made my prediction, I did not take it into account about the weather. So maybe you're right. Maybe 24. Who knows?
I'm a big weather guy. I feel like I kind of talk too much about the weather, but
that's okay. But the issue with the weather is it's flaky. You never know if it's going to be right.
Yeah, like the thing about the Oregon State game, like I saw that like yesterday. So it's like there's 5 days till the game. Who knows if the winds are actually miles per hour, you know?
Hey, I do want to touch on this real quick. I have listened to, you know, all the hype in the Pac-12 right now is around Oregon, right? They're the only team with no conference losses. No one is talking about this game. I just put it on the screen. The Ducks have to go into Oregon, go to Oregon State and play the Oregon State at home. That is like, I think people are acting like they're just going to walk into the conference championship. That is a tough game, dude. I'm glad Utah doesn't have that left. I mean, obviously we got to go into Oregon, which is going to be rough, but Oregon State is not going to be a laydown. I would say that's the number one game where I could see Oregon losing. I would not be shocked at all if Oregon State were to pull off the win. They're a very good team, and Oregon State plays really well at home. They only lost by 3 to USC, and it feels like they have more momentum now than they did back then. So,
yeah, I mean, last year, like I said, they were 5-1 at home, I think. This year, they're a 4th and 6. A couple of offensive linemen pushing Caleb Williams over the line to gain from beating USC. I mean, and this is a team, Oregon's biggest strength is their offensive line. They don't allow any sacks, but the thing about Oregon State's defense is they don't get any sacks. Their only weakness on defense is not getting pressure, and no one's getting pressure against Oregon to begin with, so it's going to be like just another day at the office for Oregon State. They can win games without getting pressure, which they've done pretty much every time they've won this year. Their secondary, I've been very vocal about them. I think they're the best unit in the conference. Front seven, not awesome, but the linebackers are experienced. I think Oregon's going to have a lot of trouble in that game. I really think they're going to lose that game. And I mean, when you look at Oregon State's offense, they don't turn the ball over a ton, and they're very good at running the football. I think they'll be able to establish the run there. And if their quarterback can play just like half decent, I think they have an awesome shot at winning that game.
No, and I'm with you 100%, man. Well, this was a great time. Dante, before we get out of here, man, anything else you want to talk about?
Not really. I think we did a good job covering it. Just go Utes. Hope for another strong win. Well, this would be 3 in a row now, correct?
Yep. Sounds
3?
right to me.
Let's hope for 3.
I think it'll be a big win, guys. Kapisi said thanks for the show. Great discussion and comments. Guys, and before we get out of here, please do make sure you guys like the video. And even if you're watching after the show, please do drop any questions you have. I'd love to answer them. And make sure you subscribe to the channel. Also, guys, again, I got Dante Guardi, his tag on the screen. I'm sure it's the same on like Instagram and all that. So yeah, give the guy a follow, right? Get his TikTok to go viral.
Hopefully.
All right. I'll see you guys later. Have a good weekend and go Utes.